Farm Bureau. Brody Miller joins us. He covers LSU for The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at Brody A. Miller. And, Brody, let's just start with the story that you wrote for The Athletic. Is LSU ready to stop Ole Miss's run of offensive domination? And your focus was on the ground game. So when you look at this matchup, is that the most important thing, what Ole Miss does on the ground versus LSU's defense?
I'd say so, right? I mean, I think Ole Miss's run game is as good of a unit as there is in college football, and people have been able to maybe, you know as well as I, maybe contain it. No one's really been able to flat out stop it, and I think that is kind of the key in a lot of ways. Because if Ole Miss gets ahead, I don't really trust LSU to come back in a game like this, and I really think it's going to dictate a lot of it. I mean, I think it's a really interesting matchup because it's like, talent-wise, LSU does match up well to stop the run. They got a really, really talented defensive line, a lot of good physical players. You would think they can, but the last 2 weeks, it's been bizarrely a pretty porous run defense against Tennessee and against Florida. Some kind of new foreign tackling issues have presented themselves. So obviously I think the Jane Daniels thing we'll get to will probably play a huge part in this game, but I just think I'm really focused on that run game for sure.
So you mentioned run game last week against Florida, and Florida putting up some numbers. I think there are two things that pop in what you just said. Number one, there was an 81-yard run in there, which skews the numbers. Now, I know a lot of people are like, well, if you take that one out, you can't take that one out, right? That's part of the game plan. It's part of the flow of the game. But the other part of what you mentioned, the tackling issues on that 81-yard run, LSU it was like there was confusion as to whether or not it was tackle football or flag football.
Yeah, and that's almost what makes kind of analyzing, what this run defense is a little more confusing because it's like, especially the Florida game especially, but Tennessee too, it wasn't like they were giving up glaring holes all game. It didn't look like the run defense was like fundamentally an issue, but it's just been this tackling thing. And I think a really common thing with this LSU defense has been they got a lot of guys who want to go for a big hit. And by the way, they're pretty good at going for big hits. They got some safeties and corners like Jay Ward and Greg Brooks who lay out huge hits. But it's leading to a lot of bounce off tackles and things like that against talented teams. So tackling usually falls in the category of can get addressed, can be fixed. Because like I said, I don't think they're giving up glaring holes, but they're 78th nationally in yards after contact, and that's obviously very important to this game.
One of the things that's fascinating to me, Brody, if you look at Ole Miss through their first 7 games, it's almost like within the offensive scheme, one thing or the other has been dominant. And really, for 6 of those 7 games, it's been the run game. But against Vanderbilt, where they really loaded up to try and stop the run and had some success doing so, I think held Ole Miss to about 150 yards. Well, that was a day that Jackson Dart went crazy, and they threw it for 450. Based on what you see from LSU defensively, and maybe what you've studied on Ole Miss a little bit, do you feel like this is a week where Ole Miss becomes a little more diverse offensively?
I think that has to be LSU's plan, right? Again, this is no coming at Jackson Dart, but I don't know if he is in that top tier of SEC quarterback, and if you want a chance in this, you probably do want to ask Jackson Dart to make Ole Miss win that game. So, but it's going to be fascinating in a lot of ways because, LSU's corners have played better than most of us expected. We expected that to be the biggest weakness, and they played pretty decent. So, but at the same time, if LSU, say, like Vanderbilt, focuses on the run, leaves one-on-ones on the outside, I would assume advantage in a vacuum goes to Ole Miss there. But I don't know. It's going to be such a big test for Jackson Dart because, like you said, Vanderbilt's not, even though they're getting better, not exactly the best opponent to really test him. So there's so many things I'm just intrigued to find out. For one, like we said, how is Ole Miss run game going to do against a really talented front seven, and then two, just can Jackson Dart win those matchups? Because I do take Mingo over your average LSU corner in a one-on-one and a play action or something like that. That's why. I think LSU probably is going to play that way to try to make Ole Miss beat them in the air, but it could backfire. Yeah,
we'll see how that piece of it shakes out. Visiting with Brody Miller from The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at Brody A. Miller. All right, what about LSU's offense facing off against what Ole Miss has done defensively? Rebels are third in the SEC in points allowed, though that number's trending up over the last few weeks as the competition has gotten a little bit better. So Jaden Daniels, right? He had the anomaly year last year where he has 10 interceptions and 10 touchdowns at Arizona State. He's really protected the football. When you think about the importance of Jaden Daniels on Saturday, do you start with his arm or with his legs?
His arm, in the sense that I think in general, I think 4 years have proven like he's going to get some yards on the ground, right? You know, and I think that's usually it's probably not going to go for 115. But he's going to get his yards. I think it's the arm because you saw Saturday against Florida. And I'm not saying Florida's a great defense, but their SEC bodies. It was the first time in 7 games LSU has seen Jaden Daniels just look confident. It's not about how great of a football he throws. It's not about him being some elite passer. What Brian Kelly has been kind of pleading with him all season is don't worry so much about taking care of the football. Trust your receivers. Because LSU has, they were supposed to have one of the, first or second best receiving corps in the country, and they still do. But Jaden Daniels hasn't really been conducive to getting the most out of that. He's so focused on not making a mistake and all those things that he takes off running, or unless the guy's just flat out open, he doesn't throw it. And I think what you saw Saturday was he just felt like if he had a one-on-one, even if the guy wasn't quote-unquote open, he just threw it. And he throws a nice football. That's the thing. And he threw for almost 400 yards, and LSU looked like a very good offense because those receivers won every one-on-one. They won every jump ball. They have that ability. So it's like if that's – I'm not saying he's going to throw that well every game, but if that's the version of Jaden Daniels they get every week, where he is a guy who just can decisively throw the ball and trust his guys, LSU's a favorite in this game. Like that version of LSU, that's a top 15 team, right? That's the version that they hoped for before the season. Am I buying that that's who it's going to be? Oh, of course not. There's one game of sample size. He needs to prove it. But that's the thing, right? It's like if that's the version, this is a really good team. So I think that will decide a lot of this game too.
Brody, I used the phrase to describe Jaden Daniels last week. He just let it rip. Right? I mean, exactly. it was like, hey, just, forget about all the other stuff and let it fly and go trust those receivers. Kayshon Boutte felt like, wasn't last week his best game of the year? Maybe by a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he was, I think he had like 190 yards for the whole year, and he had like 130 on Saturday or something like that. So, yeah. And it's like, and what happened really on top of everything we're agreeing on is like, because he trusted himself to go put a 40-yard pass up to Brian Thomas in a one-on-one, or because he trusted himself to throw it up to Malik Neighbors, all of a sudden all those guys are making the plays that, by the way, that's their strength, and then that's opening up the defense, and finally Kayshon Boutte is not being doubled as much, and you're getting those openings, and you're getting the run game set up to play action, just everything branched off that. And again, it was Florida. It's not a good defense, but still, that is the hope for LSU going forward. So, yeah, I completely agree. If that's the Jaden Daniels you get, all of a sudden those receivers are one of the better units in the country.
This game a shootout? Was it played in the 30s, possibly in the 40s?
Really good question. I don't know, right? Because it's like this whole segment, right, has been basically like, I have no idea what's going to happen if Ole Miss is going to be able to run the ball as well, and I have no idea which Jaden Daniels we're going to get. So it's like it's so hard to figure out. I think my gut says it's a little more high scoring. You combine LSU's tackling issues, you combine Daniels maybe turning a corner. Yeah, I feel like I'm leaning that way, but man, I don't actually know.
Last thing for you, Brody. What is the level of juice among LSU fans going into this game? And does it feel different than maybe the other home games so far this year, given that Ole Miss is a top 10 team?
That's a good question. I think the juice in a lot of ways in Baton Rouge isn't that crazy high in general right now, and I think that's because a lot of it is like this is a transition year to them. There's not a lot. It's just this kind of week-to-week sporadic thing that like there wasn't that great of a crowd for the Mississippi State game, quite frankly, and Tennessee was a big game. It was 25 versus like number 7 in the country, big, and Tennessee packed that stadium. So I don't know what's going on. And you know as well as I, Tiger Stadium is normally one of the toughest environments in the country. And
yeah.
It's a little weird, but I don't mean to downplay. Yes, you know as well as I that LSU Ole Miss, like they hate each other, and it's a night game. And you saw it a few years ago. And LSU wants to ruin Ole Miss's season. They want to bring Lane Kiffin down, all that stuff. So yeah, I do think there's plenty of juice for this game. There's no doubt about that. I'm just prefacing like there is kind of a weird vibe right now.
Are we classifying 2:30 now as a night game? Come on.
Oh, no. Oh my goodness, no, that's on me for just forgetting it's not a night game. It's not a night game.
I mean, at some point we're going to hear the PA announcer say the sun sets in the western sky and all that good stuff, but it feels like it's going to be late fourth quarter when that happens.
It's absolutely true. Thank you for correcting me there. But yeah, no, I mean that's going to be a big wrinkle in this game because that 11 a.m. crowd was weak, and you know I think there was another 11 a.m. game that wasn't great, and I think this 2:30, it's like I don't know if it's going to be as full as Tiger Stadium needs it to be. So that could be a small advantage for Ole Miss for sure.